Call the meeting of the regular city council to order on January 22nd at 7 p.m. Roll call, Mrs. Sabinsky.
Mr. Cowger.
Here.
Mr. Winarski.
Here.
Mr. Nahorn.
Present.
Mr. Miller.
Present.
Mr. Janik.
Here.
Mr. Van Turen.
Here.
Mr. Dembinski.
Here.
We'll now have the prayer by Chaplain Nahorn, followed by the pledge to the flag led by Sergeant at Arms Dembinski.
Please join me in bowing your heads. Gracious God, during this month, we especially remember the impactful words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who once stated, "The time is always right to do what's right." Please continue to guide us and always let us remember to do what is right for our town. And now let the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your vision. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go to item number 4, the consent agenda.
Minutes of the special council meeting held January 8, 2018. Minutes of the Streets Committee meeting held January 16, 2018. Minutes of the Utilities Committee meeting held January 16, 2018. Minutes of the Ordinance Committee meeting held January 16, 2018.
Mr. Dembinski.
Move to accept the consent agenda as read.
Mr. Van Turen.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as read. Comments? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion is carried 7-0. Number 5, acknowledgement of the public pertaining to items on the agenda. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak on any item that is on the agenda? Seeing none, we will go to item number 6, ordinances and resolutions, first readings. Item 6A.
An ordinance to approve replacement pages to the Amherst codified ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, you wish to comment?
Thanks. We had short discussion on whether to suspend council rules or not with this item last week. After reconsidering our thoughts, I would assume council's had plenty of time to review these pages, and the sooner these get, the ordinance gets passed to accept these, the sooner we can get them on the website, and it's probably better to the public. So I would really suggest, if you could, and you're comfortable with reviewing those pages, please think about suspending rules also.
Mr. Law Director, you're nodding in assent also.
Yeah, after speaking with the mayor and after hearing from our provider, online provider, it makes sense to pass it, not only pass on emergency, but also suspend council rules. So.
Okay, very good, very good. Mr. Dembinski?
Move to suspend council rules so that item 6A may be passed on the first reading.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
A second with comment. This is normally every year we do this, and all these have been passed and discussed and debated, and so this is really just for formality, and if this will make our process go smoother, I would support. And I don't like to support emergency or suspension of council rules, but in this case it's warranted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other further comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote to suspend rules.
Mr. Cowger.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Janik.
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Okay. The vote is 7-0. The rules are suspended on this particular item. Mr. Cowger.
Move to adopt.
Mr. Winarski.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt item 6A. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Cowger.
Yes.
Mr. Winarski.
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Janik.
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen.
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski.
Yes.
Motion is 7-0. The item 6A is adopted.
Of the ordinance, of the ordinance 01801.
on to item 6B.
An ordinance authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to solicit bids for infrastructure improvements, including the installation of a storm sewer interceptor within the area of Lincoln Street, Sipple Avenue, and North Main Street, and for roadway rehabilitation of portions of Lincoln Street, Sipple Avenue, and North Main Street, and authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to award the contract for such work to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, and authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for professional services with Bramhall Engineering and Surveying Company relating to such work and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Van Truen.
Just to clarify, I believe the mayor said last week that this is only an ordinance authorizing you to, the Safety Service Director, to solicit bids, correct? You're going to come back again with the actual amount that will be
Yes.
needed? Okay, thank you.
The funding should follow behind maybe a week from now,
Very
2 weeks from now.
Very good. I'd move to suspend council rules so that.
No, I think we want to put it on the
You
second.
can read this, go ahead, we've got the time.
All right.
It's such a big project, reading it
Move-
3
move to-
times is probably good.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Move to send it on to the next reading.
Okay, Mr. Nahorn,
Second.
there's a motion and a second to send item 6B on to the second reading. Mr. Winarski.
Thank you, Madam President. And I just want to take a moment to thank the administration and the mayor for patiently holding my hand and walking me through the change order process. The information you sent was eye-opening. In addition to that, I took some time to talk to contractors, and I got quite an education about the hidden surprises that they often find. I learned something about rails buried underneath the street. We used to have a trolley going up and down, and they'd run into that, and then the sand issues, and the list goes on. Anyhow, I'm very confident, and I appreciate your patience, and I'm very comfortable with what we discussed last week, and that's all good. I just want to say thanks.
I really appreciate working with you when you have concerns like that, so thank you too.
That's all. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Truren?
Yes.
Mr. Tembinski?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 and goes on to the second reading. Go to the next item, item 6C on the agenda.
An ordinance authorizing the execution of a contract to participate in the remaining requirements energy supply schedule with American Municipal Power, Inc., AMP, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Winarski.
We're looking for an emergency. You'd like this pass right away, or just attach it and go 3
Yeah,
readings?
I think we
Kind
want
of council's pleasure, but the sooner you pass this, the sooner I can start looking at the market and possibly getting the best deals. So
to
if
suspend
this could
rules.
be suspension of rules, I think it would benefit the citizens.
Okay. Then I'll so move to suspend council rules so this can be passed on the first reading.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Cowger.
Second.
The motion and the second to suspend rules. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam President. Suspend and declare? We need
Yes, and the last time we did that too. I mean, we don't know how the market's going out. The sooner we can do this, the sooner I can start watching the prices, and, you know, it's always,
And this contract takes,
you make your best educated. And I'll be talking with our rates consultant, Mr. Courtney, and with AMP on this. So we can go either way. I mean, the sooner we do it, the better chance we have of getting a lower rate. It's just more time we have to watch the market.
so we're suspending council rules and declaring emergency, immediately putting this in effect, and this is a contract through 2024, correct?
Correct. And that's only for remaining requirements. If council would so choose to get into other contracts that they would think would be better than our remaining requirements, you know, it makes that, so this is really a win-win for us. It says we can buy this stable energy at this price up until the year 2022, but again, if you find something better, we can enter into other contracts. There's not much better than that right now, and I gotta only imagine energy costs are gonna get higher. So to buy energy that far out in the future at today's cost, I think is a pretty good deal.
So although we are going to 2024, there is an out for us. What I'm getting at is.
The out is buy more energy on other sources. It's only the remaining. It doesn't say you have to buy 20% or 40% or.
You got my next question. You got my next question.
There's
and
no
that is-
minimum. It just says whatever remaining requirements is, we will purchase them in that price instead of having to go to the open market.
Because we sat down, I think, with Mayor Taylor and you that one time, and we were making sure that we didn't get stuck on that. Well, in that case, then I'll support this on emergency and suspension if we can still get out. Okay.
And again, it's not necessarily getting out of that contract. It's just
Not buying.
if you don't need it.
We don't buy it.
Further comments or questions from anyone? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yeah.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik?
Yes.
Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Motion is carried 7-0. Rules are suspended. Mr. Winarski.
Motion to adopt.
Mr. Cowger.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to adopt. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Cowger?
Yes.
Mr. Winarski?
Yes.
Mr. Nahorn?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Janik? Mr. Van Turen?
Yes.
Mr. Dembinski?
Yes.
Motion is carried 7-0. Item 6C is adopted.
It'll be ordinance 01802.
Thank you. We'll go on to item 7, ordinances and resolutions, second reading. There are none. And item 8, ordinances and resolutions, third reading. There are none. Now we go to item 9, miscellaneous and acknowledgement of the public. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on any subject? Seeing no, Mr. Miller?
No.
Oh. Seeing no one wishing to comment, we will move to item 10, agenda requests and committee meeting schedules.
I have one item, Madam President. It goes to Utilities, A1804, authorization to bid and award the 2018 tree trimming maintenance program.
Thank you very much. Finance Committee, Mr. Cowger.
Cancel, Madam President.
Building and Lands, Mr. Winarski.
Nothing at this time, Madam President.
Streets, Mr. Van Truen.
Nothing at this time, please cancel.
Community Development, Mr. Miller.
No items, please cancel.
Executive, Mr. Miller.
No items, please cancel.
Ordinance, Mr. Dembinski.
No items at this time, Madam President. Please cancel.
Thank you. Utilities, Mr. Janik.
I do have one item, Madam President, A-1804, the authorization to bid and award the 2018 tree trimming maintenance program. And we'll schedule that for February 5th at 7 p.m.
And that is complete?
Yes.
Thank
Madam
you.
President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Janik. Recycle, Mr. Nahorn.
Please keep recycling. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Technology, Mr. Dembinski.
No items at this time, Madam President. Please cancel.
Thank you. Police and Fire, Mr. Winarski.
Nothing at this time, Madam President.
Thank you. That concludes the agenda requests and committee meeting schedules. We now go to item 11 on the agenda, reports of the administration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Auditor Protect?
No reports at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Ramsey?
Yes, thank you. Today, many of you may have received in the mail your local income tax return. Here's mine. I pay them too. And then just so you know, they are due by April 17th of this year. But today, we had a little bit of concern going around because if you notice, like on the second page, which is the back of the tax return, I highlighted up at the bottom. A lot of the retirees now have to do something. Well, actually, all the retirees now have to do something. Remember when we had to change the law recently? So now the retirees are going, what do I do, what do I do? What they have to do is if they're retired and they only receive a pension, a Social Security or interest or dividend income, they can check these boxes, sign the return, and that's their tax return. Okay, they don't need to fill out any numbers. So it's one of those things that the state mandated that we had to do. This wasn't anything that you folks decided to do or we decided to do. It's one of those, changes in the law that we've had to deal with recently, if you remember. So if any of your constituents are concerned, I mean, they can always call our office and the numbers, at the top of the page here. But if any of if you just want to answer the question for them, they can just check these boxes under retired, make sure that they sign the form, and then that's their return, basically, okay? And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah,
Cora, please.
can I ask one question? Is this the purple page? Is this in purple when it's your actual?
Yes, the
Okay.
original, yeah.
Okay, it's in purple.
It's like, I guess it's purple. Blue, purple. I don't know how patriotic you want to be.
You have a question, Mr. Miller?
Yes,
for-
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. Thanks. So how does the new tax code impact our residents here in Amherst when it comes to if they only have a particular defined benefit, pension, social security, or interest or dividend income? How is this changing for our residents, both with Amherst income and state? Do you have any?
I'm not really sure about the state, but I know that the difference with us now is that they now have to file one of these pieces of paper, where in the past they didn't.
And so no income taxes drawn
Correct, correct.
on any of those sources?
Yeah, in fact, there's
For the
other,
city of Amherst?
yeah, in fact, there are other exemptions that may be possible if they're under 18, down south outside of the city for the entire year, things like that. But just so everyone knows, just in case any of your constituents ask, hey, what's the deal with, this is, we have to do it because the state says we now have to collect these forms from them. So I'm sorry, but this is the best way we can do it. Just check the box, sign it, and then that's their form. That's their return for us.
So they may not have filled in anything the last several years.
Correct.
And now they have to do a document.
Yes.
That's due by April 17th.
Yes.
Thank you, that answers all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. All done?
All done.
Mr. Cora?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Jeffries?
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just add that next Monday is the fifth Monday of the month, so we won't be having a meeting. So I would look for more committee items in your box over the next week. I would assume we'll be putting more on your agenda. So with that, no further reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dembinski.
Move to accept the reports of the administration.
Thank you very much. Mr. Winarski.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to accept the reports of the administration. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion is carried 7-0. The reports of the administration are accepted. Mr. Miller.
Move to adjourn, please.
Mr. Dembinski.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. We are adjourned at 7:19 with a vote of 7-0. Thank you.